Right, welcome to everybody. I can see some of you still joining, but we're going to kick off. My name is Kate Robson-Brown. I'm Director of Jean Golding Institute, and it's a great pleasure to be sharing this fantastic session this morning on this is the first day of our Data Week Online 2021. So I'm just going to run through just a few slides of welcome and then hand over to our speakers. Sorry, Maricela, could you move on to the next slide? I'm not in control this morning. Thank you very much. So just to let you know, a few bit of housekeeping, first of all, this session is being recorded. Please ensure that you are aware, read through and are aware of our JGI code of contact, and Lily has just put the link to that. For those of you who haven't managed to have a look at that, have a look in the chat. Please mute your microphone unless invited to speak, otherwise by the presenter or speaker or the chair. It'd be great if you could complete the registration and the feedback forms when you see them, so that we know what's worked for you, what kind of talks or events you might like in the future that we might be able to help put on this time next year. And please do introduce yourself in the chat box. Tell us who you are, where you're from, why you're interested in this material. That would be great. And we can't do this face to face, unfortunately, but we can try to have a little bit of networking in the chat. Thanks. Next slide, please. So this session is called Practicalities and Benefits of Multidisciplinary Research and Explainability. And the speakers are Drs. Maricela Gutierrez-Lopez and David Hopkinson. If you have questions as we go along, could you write them in Slido, because that helps us collate and kind of sort them out so that we can do a Q&A session at the end. And here you can see the Slido number, which you can type in to find the right space. Thank you. Next slide, please. That's also in the chat, I've just noticed. So many of you will know who JGI is, and you'll have come to lots of events before, but just in case you haven't, or you're new to us, or you're joining us as an external partner, and you're very, very welcome. The Jean Golding Institute is one of 5 University of Bristol research institutes. We are focused on data science, data intensive research, and AI. We have 4 vertical priority areas that you can see on the infographic there. They are societal challenges, data visualization, materiality and realization, including all kinds of exciting collaborations with artists and musicians, for example, as well as just graphs on page. The third one is around reproducibility and data governance. So that includes, for example, the reproducibility agenda, the open data agenda, thinking about consent and the governance landscape, and fundamental or foundational research in mathematics, statistics, and computer science largely. And we deliver those through our cross-cutting mechanisms, developing community activities like this, putting on talks like this. Also our training that we provide throughout the year, and here in an intensive way in Data Week once a year. We are the portal for the university's relationship with the National Institute for Data Science and AI, the Alan Turing Institute. And we provide a data science surgery service, if you like, a consultancy service, which is Ask JGI, and we'll give you the contact details for that at the end. But our main remit is to connect multidisciplinary experts across the university and beyond, and to do that in as imaginative ways as we possibly can. Thanks. Could you give me the next slide? Thank you. So you're here, you've registered, so you know about Data Week, but I just wanted to give a plug for for the whole week's activities. We've got 40 events through the week. Some of them around training, some of them talks, workshops, film screenings, all kinds of activities. Really exciting, and we hope you'll join us for as much or as many as you can manage. Thanks. Next slide, please. And just a quick shout out for all our people we work with, all our collaborators and friends who have supported this activity. Too many to list, but we welcome the collaborations with you all. And we hope that for those of you that are coming from our partner organizations, that you enjoy all the events you attend, and that we can work together with you in the future as well. Next slide, please. And please connect with us and keep in touch. If you don't get our newsletter already, please do let us know, sign up. Look us up on LinkedIn, watch us on Twitter. Please tweet the events. Let's get some social media activity going. That'd be great. Join us at our Data Ethics Club. Join us at our co-working sessions on Tuesdays and Thursdays. subscribe to our newsletter, and tell us how we can support you. We're here to serve the community of data scientists in the University of Bristol and beyond. So we can only do that through co-producing activities with you. So next slide, please. And if you've enjoyed Data Week, then just a quick plug for something else you might want to put in your diary. We're having our Institute Showcase in 2022. This is 18 months later than we were planning to have it because of lockdown. So it's going to be a real celebration of all things data science and data intensive research. We're hosting it in the city, down in the M Shed. And we're going to have all kinds of activities, also schools facing and public engagement facing, as well as kind of foundation methodology workshops. So the whole gamut. If you've got an idea for something that you would like to contact us about, if you just want to find out what's happening, drop us a line and let us know. Thanks. Last slide. So that's me done. It gives me enormous pleasure then to kick off this one of our first events for the first day of Data Week. And I want to introduce our two speakers. So Maricela Gutierrez is a Senior Research Associate at Bristol Digital Futures Institute at the University of Bristol. She works in investigating how the outcomes of AI can be meaningfully explained to different data publics and the adoption of emerging technologies in the workplace. And she applies her experience in interdisciplinary and design-led participatory research, creating more diverse, equitable, and inclusive data-driven futures. And David Hopkinson is a senior data scientist at LV General Insurance, which is a strategic partner of the University of Bristol with a co-produced team of data scientists. And David completed his PhD in postdoc research in engineering at Cambridge before moving to industry and joining LV. And since joining, David has built and deployed numerous machine learning models, created internal tools, and developed data science best practices. He's been really involved with research collaboration with Bristol, in particular on the XAI project. So with having done that, I will hand over to you. Really looking forward to this talk, and I'm looking out for questions in Slido. Thanks, off you go.
Thanks very much, Kate. Thanks everyone for joining. Been looking forward to giving this talk for a while too. So what we're going to be talking to you today about is the practicalities and benefits of multidisciplinary research in the XAI project, which is around explainability. We think it's been a very successful project, so we wanted to spend some time, as well as introducing you all to the project itself, spend some time actually talking about why we think it's gone well and how that collaboration has been very effective. So I'll hand over to Maricela to introduce the project first, and then we'll get on to the discussion of practicalities and benefits later on.
Okay, well, thank you, David, from the introduction. And yes, indeed, I'm going to start talking about the Explainable AI project, that is the collaboration that we have right now with LV and the Bristol Digital Futures Institute. And of course, I know many of you here are aware of Explainable AI or are even experts in this domain, but I'm going to somehow unpack it from the perspective of the project and explain how we are approaching it. So as many of you know, explainability or explainable AI, and I use them as synonyms, have emerged as a potential solution to the black box problem of models. So basically this idea that we cannot see what is happening with the models, with the data, so we can solve transparency issues with explainability. And in that way, we can also address social concerns that come with using models and data. So basically, we can see what the models are doing, then we can avoid perpetuating issues around inequalities on gender or economical injustice, you name it. So basically, I went out and did an extensive literature review on explainable AI, and really broadly, I found two ways in which it's addressed. So one is like a technical challenge. So basically, explainability is a problem that we can solve with code, and we can find a way that the models explain themselves on a technical way, and that will solve the issue, or at least approach us to a solution. And on the other side, it's also talked as a communication challenge, where basically, if we find a way of talking about what the models are doing in the correct way, with the correct audience, with the correct words, then we can comply with regulations or enhance trust and so on. So it's more like a didactic exercise around explainability. And of course, these two approaches produce really interesting results. And also, I think they are all narrow into the social concerns of explainable AI. However, what we see is that they offer a really narrow view and often technocentric, and this idea that technology can come and solve the social concerns. And basically what it does is that it has like the models and the data, and it often separates the social context in which it operates. And just to give you a quick example of this, I have a few screenshots from Fiddler, and this is nothing personal against Fiddler. They just send me their newsletter, so I know what they are doing. But there are many companies like this, especially tech companies, that they offer this kind of solutions for explaining the black box, or like for technical solutions that can then be plugged in and somehow solve unfairness or things like that. So they have this kind of product like the bias detector or all-purpose explainable AI. And the thing with this is like, it's bias in what context, and like people who are actually subject to the bias, are they involved in the discussion? So it opens a lot of questions on how we expect technology to solve a social concern. And this is where our project comes in. So basically what we are doing is exploring the explainable AI and the concerns around machine learning, but from a social research perspective. And what we are doing on a really broad level is understanding how machine learning is sitting inside particular context. So then again, it's not a model or data that is operating somewhere, but we are taking really practical and apply examples and try to understand it from there, and how can we explain it from that perspective. Also, we are looking for more democratic approaches to explainable AI, and our idea is that if we engage the communities that are actually subject to the decision making and that they are usually not part of the discussion, then we can create more democratic ways of talking about explainable AI. And of course, these are really ambitious aims, and this is a 3-year project. We are on the first year. And yeah, I mean, this is such a big issue that it will not be solved with one research project, but we feel that we are doing really interesting steps, and especially because we are working in collaboration with industrial and civic partners. And of course, this is when this presentation comes in. So we are working really closely with LV, and the idea we are looking at what LV is doing on machine learning, but from a social science perspective. And this is what's going to be the focus of this presentation, is exactly what that means. And we are also working with 2 community centers in Bristol. One is the Northwest Media Center, and the other is Black Southwest Network. And basically, these are 2 communities that have, or we assume that they have different concerns and different understandings of machine learning. And our idea is to open up the discussion with them and figure out how can we explain models in a way that is meaningful for them. So it's not so much us going and showing them explanations and like, do you like A or B? It's more, what are you concerned about? And from there, trying to build up explanations from the bottom up. So I think that's what kind of centers you around how we see explainable AI and the project. And as I said, like the core key here, the thing that is making everything work is the partnership that we have, and especially with LV. So I'm going to hand it to David to continue talking about it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marcella. So this is where I plug the partnership for LV and University of Bristol quickly. So this was a partnership that was set up just over a year ago now, and it's reaching into quite a lot of areas of the university. Could I have the next slide, Marcella? Thanks. So the reason we're so invested in this partnership is it really helps build our kind of cutting edge innovation research side of what we're doing, and also build up a lot of skills within our team in the company. So we've got several people who are upskilling through PhDs, potentially looking at masters and things like that. And also it's just great to be supporting the next generation of researchers and data scientists. Could I have the next slide, please? So in the over the course of the year that we've had this partnership running, we've already got links into lots of different departments within the university. I won't go into great detail on each one, but there's an awful lot going on. Could I have the next slide, please? And yeah, there's a huge number of activities around areas of student engagement with all sorts of mentoring, hackathons and things like that being set up. We're also, like I said before, lots of people developing skills, people studying PhDs, starting master's courses, etc., and several big research and innovation projects, of which this project is one. So that's the kind of the context in which this collaboration has emerged. And yeah, so I think hand it back over to Maricela to talk about the methods that we've been using and some of the results that we found so far.
Yes. So I'm going to return you to the Explainable AI project. And now that you have a better idea of how we see Explainable AI and also of the partnership between Bristol and LV. So basically, the first step in our project was to do pilot study inside the organization. And basically, as I said, we are using social science methods to understand what is happening inside LV in terms of machine learning and how that is basically changing the organization itself. So the first step was a pilot study, just to have a clear idea of what's happening and allow us to ask the right questions for the next stages of the research. So on the first instance, we were interested on understanding how people inside LV explain the use of machine learning. So this went beyond saying like they have 8 models implemented for solving or supporting 8 decisions. It was more like, how do people explain that machine learning is there in the first place? So how is that kind of, it's something that wasn't there and suddenly is there, how do people explain it? And also we were interested on how those models that are already in place and in general, the data science strategy, how it has shaped the organization itself. So on a kind of a broader kind of level. So the methods that we are using, then again, is all based on social science, is mostly qualitative research. And we are doing a participant ethnography where I'm basically embedded into the data science team of LV. And from there, we are expanding to different areas inside the organization. So it's by being inside of the team, I can see different things than just coming as an external. And that's the whole idea around ethnographies, is being one of them. And the first step was doing some key informant interviews, and this is part of the ethnography. And basically, you identify people that can give you information about what's happening inside the organization on a really high level, and then from there you start structuring your fieldwork. So I interviewed 12 participants, 4 were from business areas, so managers around LV from different parts of the business. 6 people inside the data science team, so mostly senior data scientists and managers, and 2 senior stakeholders, so basically people that are driving LV. And the results, and I'm going to give you like a super quick overview of what we found, is that when we ask people to talk about explanations, regardless of their technical expertise, they talk about explainable AI and machine learning in general in terms of the social impact of models inside and outside LV, also on how it has changed work, so how people understand their roles inside the organization, also how it supports organizational values. And that was super interesting because I was not really expecting to hear people talk about explainable AI and values, but it was really related inside LV. Also we found, and these are just high-level results, that the explanations were not constrained to user interfaces. So this kind of model like Fiddler, for example, that they have like a dashboard and this is your explanation basically, that's not what's happening inside the organization. So when I ask how those explainable AI looks like, they talk about meetings, they talk about best practices, documentation, so all sorts of artifacts and interactions that happen around them. Also, when we were talking on who creates the explanations, it went well beyond data scientists. So basically people, even without what we will say a technical expertise, they create explanations. And those explanations were used throughout the life cycle of models. So it was not only like the final person that takes the decision needs an explanation. Basically, there were explanations from requirements until business as usual, which also give us an idea of the richness that is around explanations. Also, a really interesting finding was that when we talk about technical explanations, the data scientists were really confident and they said that they were actually quite easy. So that's kind of the technical challenge of explainable AI is not really a challenge inside LV, at least not superficially. And what was perceived as really hard were the social explanations. So for example, those that are given from a call handler to a client, or from LB to a regulator. So those that require more than just kind of technical solution were the hardest ones. So that's the results on a high level. And then two really key examples that we can also use to talk about how explainable AI looks like when we put it together with social aspects of interactions. So for example, when they talk about, they have a really extensive, and I'm sure David could take this talk and just continue talking about the ethical framework of AI inside LB. So there is really a lot of work. There are standards, there are interdisciplinary collaboration, framework within the framework, you name it. And one of the concerns from all participants is how to explain it to the public. So there is this really big gap between what is happening inside the organization and how to get that outside without avoiding misunderstandings in the process. And in this sense, we think that in this project, we need to go beyond the communication challenge. So this is not kind of a PR exercise of like, how do we explain LB models to people? We need to go deeper than that. And in that sense, in this project, we want to open up the conversations with the public. And basically, if we understand their concerns about machine learning, then we can open a two-way discussion. And also we can address that asymmetry between companies and citizens in how their data is used. So I think that's one of the core things that we want to do as the next steps in our project based on our findings. Another of these examples is that we found that explanations were treated as a business function, and this is one of the quotes of one of the data scientists. So this is quite interesting because then again, it puts explainable AI as something way past a technical challenge. And in that sense, as I already mentioned, people from different business areas are creating explanations. And that led us to considerations around, for example, the power structure inside LP. So what some people can, the different explanations that they received also depend on their position inside the company. Power structures, we need to consider organizational procedures, how knowledge is created and distributed inside the organization in order to have an understanding of explainable AI. And of course, these are more sociological concepts that we hope to start opening up in the next stages of the process in our research. But what we see as the initial big kind of step is that we want to empower people from different areas of the organization to understand models and to question them from a critical perspective. So then again, this is not about data literacy. It's not that we want them to understand the models. It's that we want them to question them from their own lived experience. And from there, we hope that we can build a more democratic approach to explainable AI. So of course, this sounds great and it's kind of very aspirational kind of research. However, while we feel that this will bring us closer to a more democratic approach, as I already mentioned at the beginning, one project will not solve. This is such a big issue in so many fronts. We feel that one thing that is helping us to move this idea further and to go beyond the theoretical aspects of this kind of research is the collaboration with LB and the fact that we can do this together. So this is where I also invite David to the floor and we can have a more kind of a discussion, open discussion on what works well and why in our partnership.
Thanks, Maricela. Yeah, so we pulled together a few kind of talking points that we were going to go through, and then hopefully at the end of that we've got lots of time for questions from the floor as well. So should we start then? So yeah, kind of starting off here with the one of the main benefits that we found from having this very close collaboration. It's been that certainly from my perspective, I've really gained a lot from having a fresh perspective, being introduced to the perspective of social scientists from regular conversations with Maricela and Susan. That's really helped me to reevaluate a lot of my opinions around AI ethics, and definitely have been some of my views have definitely shifted from as a result, directly or indirectly, of those conversations. And Maricela, have you got much to say on this topic as well?
I think from my perspective, then again, is and good that you mentioned, David. This project, we are also working with Professor Susan Halford, that is the co-director for the Bristol Digital Futures Institute. So she has a key role in this project. And we are also working with Ben Pereira, that he's one of the data science managers inside LV, and he has also been really active in this collaboration. So just to acknowledge the team early on in the presentation. And for me, the fresh perspective, I have in my introduction at the beginning, probably you heard that I have a background from different, like a really multidisciplinary background. But what I found is that this collaboration has given me much more empathy to the people doing data science in the industry. So it's really easy in a way from an academic perspective, say like, oh, we need more discussions around ethical AI and the industry needs to take accountability and so on. But on the other side, I can see that that is happening and that there are other things that we need to address first in order to have those discussions in a meaningful way. So in that sense, it has been quite refreshing also for me to change that perspective a bit. Something else from here?
Yeah, just to say really that I think in terms of what the kind of fresh perspective from my perspective has been, is that I think there's always been a tendency to consider things at the kind of group level in the past, and I think having more conversations with you guys, I've started to think a lot more about kind of individual issues, I guess, around AI ethics. So thinking about things from an individual perspective and how one individual understands things, how one individual is impacted by things. It's been one of the main things that's come out of this for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's bringing together different disciplines. Also, it makes us aware that it goes beyond having a critical perspective into models and data. It also needs to be applicable, and it needs to produce a revenue and so on. So there are so many other considerations to come into this research. So I think that can only come if you are actually working closely and side to side with people from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely the result of having lots and lots of frequent conversations is how you get this kind of shift in perspective. Right.
Okay. So then we have challenges.
Yeah, the big one. So there are of course lots of challenges in any collaboration, particularly I think around multidisciplinary things like this, where you start from a position where you're speaking in different languages to some extent. But I think a lot of the major challenges have been well addressed in this project. One of the big ones that was well addressed early on is this point on expectation management. Like I say, if you're talking in essentially different languages, it's very easy, like different, coming from different disciplines. It's very easy to have kind of very different baseline expectations of what the outputs of a project are going to be, what timeframes are going to be, for instance. I guess a very simple example of this would be how, if you remember Maricela, when there was an issue around getting audio recordings transcribed, which is just complete standard practice really in ethnographic research, but we hadn't accounted for that in our initial agreement around how data was going to be handled. So that was something that we had a bit of a panic around how to address that at a key point in the project. But that was all handled pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think then again, it sounds kind of like very repetitive, but all comes down to communication. So basically, what we do to kind of, in this example of the transcript, what we did is opening up the research protocols and, for example, ethic forms, all the documentation that we are creating, we very openly share that with LV. And we made sure that they agree with everything that was in there and try to agree with the providers, get everybody on board on the conversation. So it's, I think when you do this kind of research, you have to make sure that you don't get into your own research bubble and actually open up to the discussion. And it's not us going and doing research and kind of out of nowhere. Is you need to have a discussion from the planning onto the actually doing the research. Another thing that I would say is quite challenging in general. I have done, throughout my research, I have been doing, different kind of studies inside workplaces. and it's always a problem. So this is not a case of LB kind of specific, is finding the time to actually talk with people inside the organization is super hard. So in that case, the time allocation is a challenge. So of course, these are really busy people. Finding sometimes 10 minutes in their agenda is a challenge. So how to address that is something that we are still working on, especially as we are going to start a more extensive field work. I think David can talk on how he has managed to allocate space for the project. But from my perspective, is actually quite challenging, and it comes down to make sure that you explain what you want to do and the value of them being engaged.
Yeah, so I guess we've been very fortunate that there's a lot of buy-in into these research collaborations, and this one in particular from from a very senior place within the company. So it's been quite straightforward to get quite substantial amounts of time for myself, for instance, allocated to supporting this research, and equally I think it is challenging getting time to speak to people. But I think would you agree, Maricela, that so far talking to fairly senior people their engagement has generally been quite good. They're quite they're invested and keen to engage. Where it gets more challenging is when we're starting to look at having conversations with people kind of lower down in the company, like frontline call handler staff. That's that sort of level where their time is quite pressured, and they aren't perhaps as in control of their work calendar as more senior people would be. So we need to make sure that we have the correct things in place within the organisation, that they aren't penalised for taking an hour out of their day for doing an interview, for instance. So that's all being addressed, but that's something that we have to make sure we do properly. But yeah, in general, the fact that we have very strong buy-in from all of the senior people in the organisation does make that time allocation issue, I think, somewhat easier to address.
Absolutely. I think talking about more senior members inside LB, I think and that directs me to the challenges, is the expectation management. So just make sure that we communicate what comes out of social research. So it's not something that they will probably measure at the end or optimize or implement. So kind of changing that language on how the project is going to look like at the end is really important. But again, it's just they are invested in the project. So we just need to make sure that we communicate that clearly rather than leave it at the end and have disappointment.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one is the project setup.
Yeah, so lots of credit to both Ben and Susan on this one. There was a lot of work to do in the early stages and even before the project started in getting everything set up to run smoothly. We've already discussed buy-in and setting expectations, getting everyone on board with the general goals of what we're actually going to get out of the project. But there's also a huge amount of admin to do and contracts to be set up, which I think has gone pretty well. Like the way that we've managed to enroll you so that you are like fully embedded within our data science team, it's definitely streamlined a lot of that, hasn't it? Because it's you've just had the access of an employee of the company to all of our systems, and that has definitely made things go quite smoothly. What are your thoughts on that, Maricela?
Absolutely. I think from the LB front, it has been more a matter of negotiating the different ways that we proceed in research and in the organization. But the fact that I'm part of LB from a more administrative level has also helped to facilitate that I have access to the environment, to the communication, kind of emails and so on. So that really helps to smoothen out the process. I think with LV, the process has been really smooth. I mean, there has been peaks and valleys, but it's just a matter of talking and negotiating it and finding the middle ground. But I have to say that in the scope of the larger project that we have, also working with 2 community partners plus the university plus LV. So sometimes the administrative process gets a bit complicated. Because you have bureaucratic procedures from all fronts. So sometimes eye is kind of being pulled from different directions. But then again, I think it's one of the things of doing this kind of research. And at the end, we think that we are sure that the results are going to outweigh like the positives towards the challenges of the administrative kind of setting up part. But yeah, it has been kind of a journey. And I think indeed it's a, yes, being embedded in the data science team has been quite an advantage to the project. That has made it so much easier in many fronts.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is the approach that we've taken towards things that are commercially sensitive. So the fact that we've basically given you access, you see commercially sensitive stuff that you wouldn't be able to then publish potentially because it's, business secret or something like that. But we're giving you access, like we're allowing you to see all of those things and then making sure that we don't publish things that that shouldn't be, rather than doing it the other way around where we kind of try and kind of ferry you around inside the company without seeing bits that you shouldn't see. And I feel like that definitely, it makes it a lot more straightforward, doesn't it, to do things that way?
Yeah. And also I think that has to say, I have to say that about LB. I haven't felt that they have limited the research in any way. It's just kind of a matter of course, there are sensitive things that are inside because it's a different organization. So we as researchers, we need to be aware and we need to respect that. But on the other side, I haven't felt that has limited the research so far. So that's really good. And I'm sure that we will find a way forward.
Yeah.
Then we have running the project.
Yeah, so there's a bit of a theme here on the communication and regular talks. And this is a big part of how we continue to build trust so that we can continue to give very unfettered access to Maricela to everything. But yeah, we have very regular conversations, don't we? We talk, you, me, Ben and Susan all talk every couple of weeks, don't we? We have a kind of hour-long session where we go through the current progress on the project, and a lot of that time is spent dealing with kind of administrative issues as well as talking about the research outputs, but having that regular contact with the more senior people who can actually sign off on things, I guess, is quite helpful, isn't it? But also that regular communication about how the research is going and what themes are emerging. It's really, really great for us to actually feel like we're having a meaningful input to the research, and also that we are, we're getting things back from it all the time because we're hearing from you, Maricela, what you're finding on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's also like, for example, for the interviews, we transcribe everything and then I did a thematic analysis. So all very standard, but at some point we started discussing also the themes, like, okay, so we found this, what do you think? So it's kind of like also opens up the two-way kind of discussion, so we can make sure that what we are seeing is actually what is happening inside the organization. So that can also help us to adjust how we see our research and the findings and the next steps and so on. So everything has been very collaborative in that sense, and everything is very open. So we have a shared, what is like a shared SharePoint or something like that, and everybody has access. So then again, we are as much as possible, we are opening everything. All the research bits and pieces are open to LB to see and to have a say on them, because that's only helping for the partnership. And I think in the future, it can also help us avoid, having kind of miscommunications. So I think that's super important. Yeah, and I am basically the point of contact. So if everything, like in theory, I should know what's happening. So that's also important, I guess, to have somebody that has an overview of the project, because at the end of the day, David, Susan, Ben, they are running other things in their roles. So I can be really focused and narrowed on this project.
That's great. And yeah, all of the great communication that we've managed to maintain kind of feeds into the next point, I think, if I remember, which is this is I think the kind of keystone of where all of the benefits have come from, that there's been a great deal of trust and openness on both sides, I would say, in this collaboration, which for us is, I think, one of the main kind of positive outcomes of that is that because we're quite engaged in the research, and because we're opening up quite a lot, so Maricella's seeing a lot of the real nitty-gritty of what happens inside the organization, that means that the research outputs are that much more valuable to us, because they really are based on the reality. They really do reflect what's going on, and that's a really helpful thing for us to see, and I'm sure it's also beneficial on the research side of getting that greater insight too.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think it has, without that, I don't know how you could make a project like this working. If you are kind of like put in a corner, and the researcher cannot see any further and past whatever is in front of them, then it's very hard to actually build on what we are talking around democratic approaches and so on. So we need that space to work. And then again, I think it has been a lot of from the beginning and how the project has been set up. And that's why we included that in this presentation. But in the day-to-day, we really have to push to be open and to make sure that this is a shared effort and not just see it as we want to have 10 papers published out of, well, that's a lot, but anyway, so it's not about publications, it's not about kind of prototypes, it's not about finding ultimate solutions, it's about building this partnership and making sure that we can find interesting outcomes from the industry and the civic partners and for the research side. So it's kind of putting everything together and making it work as a whole rather than pushing in one single direction. Yeah,
I think that's a good point, isn't it? The fact that the partnership itself can be kind of seen as one of the key outputs of the research really does help. I mean, it's constantly building and growing, isn't it? That's a really great thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have time maybe to open up for some questions if there are any.
Yeah, let's do it.
Thank you so much. It's really, really interesting to get your insights on the project, and it feels like it's because it's ongoing. It feels like a fantastic kind of in progress project. So it's lovely to be able to have insight into it like that. There's a number of questions actually. So firstly, for Maricela, has your literature review on explainability already been published? And if so, are you able to share the link for that?
Not yet, but hold the space. So we are working on that first publication that will include the literature review and the findings at LV. So that's work in progress, and hopefully we will publish them soon. Yeah, that's the answer.
Great. And next question, you noted different languages between specialisms. Do you have any tips for conducting interviews between ethnographers and machine learning specialists? This is to either of you.
That's a really good question. I think as me as the ethnographer, I have to say, I'm not a sociologist by training. So first will be that not to be scared of these methods. So it's not that you need to have this kind of a PhD in sociology in order to do an ethnographic study. So that's kind of like a basis. And I think what I use is curiosity, and trying to see from their perspective is understand their part of the world, which is the entire point around ethnography. Is not using my assumptions, but basically understanding what things mean for them. So I would say that the first step is for the ethnographer to lose kind of expectations and just let the research guide you.
And I suppose I should specify that what I was referring to as well when I talked about different languages was more around, not so much around when we're doing interviews as when we're talking about the methods and the approach to the research, I suppose, which is one of those areas where occasionally I've asked I've been asking questions because I haven't understood a particular method that has been referred to or something like that.
Yeah, it goes both ways. And Roman's asked a question for Maricela. Though the goal of ethnography was to find how AI was explained in LV, did your presence in teams affect how data scientists thought about explainable AI?
That is a really good question, and I'm afraid that I cannot answer it because that's research that will happen in the future. So the thing that we did now was interviews. So basically, we just selected, let's say, people that are on the top of the organization, and from there we are going to start to go deeper into, for example, going into teams of call handlers, the data science team itself, and so on. So I think in that case, when I'm sitting with them, hopefully we can do this in person at some point, then it would be quite interesting to reflect on how me being there changes on how they use the explanations or how they explain machine learning, if they kind of have reflected about this before, on what terms and so on. So I think that's a question that will be opened up in a more deep level during the fieldwork itself. I think the interviews at least help them to reflect, because some of the participants told me, like, it was kind of a way of reflecting on their own practice. So in that sense, yes, I guess this will kind of bring explainability on to the top of the organization, or is bringing it to the top of the organization. But it was not on practice, it was just interviews. So it's a different kind of impact.
Yeah, great, thank you. Next question is, how did you define AI for the purposes of this project?
Do we have a formal definition of AI for this project?
To be fair, I think how we are defining it right now is however LV is defining it, which is, for example, we try not to use AI, we use machine learning, because that was kind of like one of like, you should not say AI. So, and it's kind of like, it's in that kind of constraint of the type of techniques that are being used inside LV, I would say. What do you think, David?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we would say within our data science team that we use machine learning methods. We wouldn't refer to it as AI typically, but quite often, people use those terms interchangeably, don't they? So, we end up using AI quite a bit, and it's in the project title as well in this case. But yeah, we're referring to just general use of machine learning techniques, really.
Okay, that in itself probably opens a can of worms.
Yeah, I know that's pretty wide, pretty broad still, isn't it? But,
yeah. Okay, no, that's helpful. And the final question, were there any challenges in conducting ethnographic research within LV? Well, you've talked about some of them, but do you have any recommendations for other ethnographers working within private firms?
I think the part of the discussion that we just have, I think that will contain most of the advice, because then again, it's not something that the ethnographer can control. It's something that has to be mediated and coordinated with the industrial partner. So I think if we have taken a more kind of research only approach, so for example, not showing I can share one of the things that we are doing now. So basically, this is the first time that I'm doing research online, so I'm used to consent forms that people can sign and I can keep the piece of paper, and that's very easy. But online, it has been quite a challenge because signing PDFs sometimes is kind of a nightmare. So we went through all this complicated process to get LV and the university to agree to get participants to send an email for consent. So basically, once that we start the study, and this is pending to ethics approval, we will be able to ask participants, just send this piece of text and you will have consent. And it has been quite a process to get LV to agree, the university to agree, internally in the team to discuss and the pros and cons of having this approach. So yes, it has been a process, and it's probably very meaningless, but at the end of the day, we are talking about consent. And we are making sure that we are discussing it on a practical level, and also that has emerged some of the concerns around consent inside LB, for example. So I think it's making sure that all those practicalities of the research are negotiated with the partner are really important to make sure that things go smoothly. So I would say involving them throughout the research and not just only for conducting it is important.
Yes, genuine co-production is the key. Yeah.
That's quite a good example of a case where so the issue with having PDFs getting signed is just that 10-15 minutes that someone has to spend of their day trying to work out how to sign it is actually, you know, that's quite a problem for some people. So getting this sorted out is a real benefit to getting more access in the company, getting more people involved.
So that was the last question on Slido, and we are bang on time. Amazing. Thank you very much again for your really interesting presentation. And I guess I have one more question for you, which is, how do you fancy coming back next year for another update? Data Week. It would be great to see you again and find out how it's gone, the next stage. Excellent. Thank you to everybody who joined us today. Thank you for your great questions and the conversations in the chat as well. It's been a real pleasure hosting this, and I very much hope, Maricela and David, I get a chance to meet you in real life at some point in the next sort of 6 months or so. But for now, thanks everybody. Enjoy your next sessions. Come to the networking, the Remo networking tomorrow lunchtime. It'd be great to see you. We can continue conversations, and have a lovely afternoon. Bye, everyone.
Thanks all.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.